Hi, class. Today we're going to end up looking further into our conversations about ethics and dive into corporate social responsibility as well. So, today's lesson, we're going to talk about values and the ethical dilemma, and we're going to talk about business ethics, and then we're going to start diving into a case called Foremost Department Stores. So, today we want to kind of wrap up a conversation about ethics and ethical theory. We've talked about it for a few lessons up to this point, but we want to get a few more pieces of terminology so we kind of understand what we're talking about here. So what are values? Well, what is your value system? Values are broad beliefs about what is appropriate behavior. And so when we think about our code of conduct, when we think about our morals, what is our ethical viewpoint, they come down to values as well. And so what do you believe is appropriate, right? Do you believe that swearing in class is appropriate? Probably not. Yet you might believe that swearing in class might be appropriate in a different scenario, right? Some of you talked about doing and saying potentially racist or potentially insensitive or prejudiced jokes amongst your friends. Why is that appropriate behavior versus when it's maybe in front of myself, right? Again, I'm not saying it is appropriate behavior, but why do you believe it's appropriate behavior? Or thinking about when you're using expletives or racially insensitive language is not acceptable in regular conversation, perhaps, yet if you hear it in some music that you like to listen to, it becomes more appropriate for you. So think about where do your values lie? What are some non-negotiables? What do you believe is appropriate versus not so appropriate? And so our values conversation will talk about what you have in terms of terminal values and perhaps what are your instrumental values. And so what do I mean by these two things? So terminal values talks about preferences about desired end states. Okay, so what does that mean? This fancy language. What do you want in the end? Ultimately, if you are very strongly terminally value led, you're more concerned about the end. What is the end result? What happens at the end of everything, right? And so that's what you care about more potentially versus instrumental values, which talk about how do we get to the end, right? Does the ends justify the means? And so if you're an instrumental value person who believes in this more, you would say the ends do not justify the means. You care about how things happen or what brought you to a certain place. And again, this is not a either or. We are all terminally value and instrumentally value led in terms of what we believe in, right? But sometimes there are others who think, well, it turned out okay, so that's fine, right? Versus someone who's going to be very concerned about the methodology, right? And so if you think about this ethics theory and this value theory, we think about our previous lessons, perhaps on managing and leading, right? Thinking about the knowledge economy, right? Thinking about fair process. If we think about fair process in the knowledge economy, what value system matters? The instrumental value system matters quite a great deal, right? We care about the process through which decisions are made. Your employees and your people, your group members, are going to care about how you came to a final conclusion versus just the conclusion, right? Getting a better grade may be very important to you, but what happened along that way, right? So terminal values and instrumental values, while both influence all of us, you might want to look at, what behavior are you doing, and is it because of terminal values or is it because more of instrumental values? And so I will say, how you get to a certain point matters, but the end point also does matter. So terminal values matter and instrumental values matter. And so you need to figure out, what is appropriate behavior, what are your values, and what is driving these values, right? Your terminal values or your instrumental values. And that might dictate what you choose to do in a certain situation. And so we talk about values, we talk about appropriate behavior. And so ultimately, we all are going to end up doing inappropriate behavior or unethical behavior at some points in time. So you think about, when you've done things and it's wrong, we're all part of that. And so your value system is going to dictate at some points in time, you're going to look at the near future results versus the long-term results, the short term versus the long term, and think, oh, I want that immediate satisfaction, and I'm going to sacrifice something in the future. or not caring about someone else and doing something for yourself, right? When in reality, you know in your head that you should be doing something different, right? So examples of unethical behavior could be as follows: discrimination, sexual harassment, conflict of interest, consumer confidence, organizational resources, etc., etc. So these are fairly major ones, right? So in your mind, you might be thinking about very small things, but ultimately, you're thinking about these small things because you probably aren't in as big situations. But as you grow up and as you grow older, you go into organizations, you get into positions of power. Maybe your small decisions, your small examples of unethical behavior become larger ones. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to figure out what unethical behaviors are we doing and how do we curb them, right? How do we stop them from happening before they turn into these larger issues, right? Before they turn into us only thinking about our end results and not caring about how we get there, right? Before we do things that we know are unethical or that go against our values, but so many times in our lives we've gone against these values and we've justified them, right? So starting to change that perception in your brain now is going to help you avoid some of these problematic things in the future. So some people will think about things and think about, well, I'm just going to do it. So why would we do these things? Why would we perhaps cheat on a test? Why would we perhaps lie to our parents, right? We all will probably say that, yes, these are unethical or things that we would not normally do, or we would never tell people that, that's the right thing to do. However, you justify it. And so everyone ultimately rationalizes why they do unethical behaviors. And so let's examine these for a little bit. The first is, one, is it really illegal? Is my ethical behavior really illegal? Or was my unethical behavior really illegal? And so when we think about it, some of us will think about driving. So we all drive, and then we speed. And so if we're in an 80 zone, we might go 90, we might go 100, and some people automatically will say, well, 10 over is fine. Some people will say 20 over is fine, right? And so then you ask yourself, is it really illegal? Like, I might drive by a police officer going 10 over the speed limit, and I won't get a ticket. And if that happens, then I have to ask myself, is this really an illegal activity? And so you think about that kind of stuff, right? So you ultimately rationalize something. You ultimately convince yourself that, oh, actually, this is okay, right? When you think about something, about saying kind of, racially insensitive jokes to your friends, oh, it's not bad, it's fine because amongst my friends. And so you convince yourself of something that maybe you would normally think it's not good, but you come to a point where, you've decided that in this situation it's okay, right? The next scenario, it is better for everyone, right? You rationalize it by saying, well, I should do this thing because it's going to be better for the entire organization, right? It's going to be better for all of us. We're all going to benefit. So I'm doing this for the sake of everyone else, right? Are you convincing yourself of this? Or do you actually believe this? Right? You're rationalizing your behavior, trying to spread this blame to everyone, or trying to tell yourself you're being the hero instead of doing something that's unethical, right? Think about the utilitarian view, right? It's better for everyone is very much a utilitarian view. Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to sacrifice my own ethics because I believe that the world would be a better place, right? So that's a rationalization for doing something that's unethical. Next, no one will know. How many of you do this all the time? You always do this, right? Think about choosing to do something because no one's watching you, right? If you had a camera on you 24/7, your behavior would 100% change, right? And so you do things in secret that no one finds out about, or you think that no one finds out about, and it changes your behavior. You're willing to stretch that boundary of ethics because you're the only one who's going to be judging yourself, right? And so be careful of that. That's a very, very tough one because people are often doing things in secret that they wouldn't want people to know about, right? Think about all the dirty secrets of politicians that come out because people are trying to find them, right? Nothing is 100% secret. And so, not that this lack of secrecy should deter you. Your actual ethics and values should be what deters you. But though no one will ever know, rationalization is popular and is flawed, as all of these are really flawed rationalizations. And the last one is the company has my back. So oftentimes, your company will ask you to do something, or your boss will ask you to do something, and you think, you know what, I should do this for the better of the company, right? We even asked the questions on the previous lesson regarding those ethical scenarios. You know, should I give the refund? Should I not give the refund? It's company policy, right? You are doing something that you believe is wrong because you believe the company will support you, or the company has told you not to do it, right? Like, are you going to go dump something, some pollutants in a water because the company tells you to save some money? You know, maybe the company says, don't worry, we'll take care of you. All these kinds of things, right? You have to understand that, yeah, maybe the company does have your back, but is that a good enough reason to go against your ethics or do unethical behavior, right? Are you trying to protect your job more than protecting your own values, right? You're sacrificing your values to earn a paycheck. And of course, it's not an easy choice. I don't want to be trivial about it. Sometimes these choices can be difficult, but you have to ask yourself, what is your ethics or morals worth? And ultimately, all these things won't really matter unless we're put to the test, unless we're put to a choice that forces us to potentially make an unethical decision. And that is what we call the ethical dilemma, right? A situation that, although offering potential benefit or gain, may be considered as unethical. So we're faced with these decisions frequently, all the time, right? We know that doing something unethical will give us benefit. Sometimes it's small benefit, sometimes it's big benefit, but we are going to benefit from doing something at some point in time, right? This ethical dilemma causes us to challenge the standards, right? If we have a standard we keep, difficulty arises when a benefit can come from breaking this standard, right? All of you, I hope, think that cheating is wrong, you know, ethically questionable, right? All of you potentially could have a chance to cheat, right? And so you are put in a position where, you know, you could break this ethical standard because it might benefit you somehow, right? Some way, right? Could be cheat on a test, could be do something in an athletic competition that's unethical, like committing a penalty, trying to get away with something, right? All these kinds of things are posed, and so they make you choose, right? Do I do things the right way, or do I do things hopefully that'll get me out on top? Although oftentimes the ethical dilemma causes us to look at short-term self-interest or financial gain versus the long-term ramifications of your actions to yourself or to other people, right? Think about cheating on a test. You know that cheating on this test might help you in this short term right now to get a little bit better mark, but in the long term, you're still not going to know the information. You're going to probably do worse on your exam. You're not going to actually learn what you want to learn, especially if you're going to this in the future. So you're focused on getting the current grade right now, as well as not putting the time and effort into studying, right? So you're posed with a dilemma that you already know the answers to and already know the ramifications of, yet this short-term gain is too hard to resist for some, right? And that's your self-regulation, your ability to make changes and determine, what can I do for myself? And so this dilemma often overcomes many corporations in spite of their vision, mission, public stance, and opinion, right? Again, all these companies we talk about, we're going to bring it back to a higher level, a larger situation. These companies will say things in their mission, vision, public statements, and then they'll do things that are fully against what they say they're trying to do, right? If you think about all those presentations you did on those companies that had these controversial issues, right? You think about them and you think, don't they try to represent something else? Isn't the brand about something else? Yet they're doing things that are that question their brand, that question their ethics, right? All these companies have this as a problem. And so the ethical dilemma is what causes companies to really mismanage how they behave, right? And ultimately, this always is going to happen because they're always faced with a decision that's going to put their short-term benefit ahead of their ethics. And so how do we stop companies from doing this? How do we stop individuals from doing this? Well, we have to measure it. We have to figure out how do we cut through these unethical decisions to keep us accountable to what we want to do. And so there's this reading that I want you to go through, but we'll go over the three main points together. And so one, start measuring ethics and values, right? Don't make ethics and values the thing that can fall away from corporate performance. Right? Oftentimes we think corporate performance is separate. Your financial instruments, your measurements of how well you do as an organization or as an individual is purely like performance measures, statistics that measure how much money you make. Well, why not measure actual ethical values, right? Measure these types of things, right? If you can start measuring this kind of stuff and kind of giving people ratings based on their ethics, then you might actually be able to stop some of these dilemmas from happening, right? Stop the rationalizations from making people rationalize against something, right? Publicly share these results. Like measure them, yeah, great. Measure this stuff, but then let everyone know, right? This keeps us accountable. This keeps you accountable internally amongst your peers and your organization. It also keeps your organization accountable outside of the organization, to the public, to other companies, to the government, right? If you measure it and publicly share it, people are less likely to be unethical. And then make it part of performance. Reward your people because of their ethical contributions. Reward them not only for their financial contributions and the profit-making contributions, but reward them for being ethical. Reward them for being better, right? So some companies have rewards for this, and there are rating systems that help governments rate companies. But even think about, this is not the same, but think about when you have like an Uber driver who has a star rating, or when you read reviews of products and they have 4 stars or 5,000 reviews, whatever. You are vested into reading these reviews on companies that have better ratings for whatever they may be, right? For certain types of performance that have nothing related to the actual product, but just you want a satisfaction rating, right? Imagine that these results could be about ethics and about how well you perform as a corporate citizen, right? That's going to move the needle, and it's already happening. And so oftentimes companies have to do something called corporate social responsibility, and they're audited for their work in doing better for society, right? And so corporate social responsibility is the thought that there's an obligation of our organization to serve its own interests and those of society, right? We believe that companies should believe this. We believe that they should want this. We believe that companies need to balance and consider everybody, right? All stakeholders. And anyone who's impacted by the behavior of the organization. Who could be impacted, right? The impacts could be your stakeholders, your stockholders. They could be your employees. They're your customers. They're the communities that you live in, right? So you, as a company, should be responsible to balance all these needs, right? We're not saying reduce your profits and don't be profitable. We're saying, yes, be profitable because that's balancing the needs of your stakeholders. But we're also saying be responsible to the environment because that's balancing the needs of your communities and your world, because everyone is a stakeholder in your organization. And so that should answer the question that should businesses care beyond their profit-making needs? Of course they should care, right? Business should care about their people, making sure their employees have respect, making sure their employees have benefits, making sure their employees are safe. Corporate responsibility should make your company better. But the whole problem is that at times, doing corporate social responsibility could reduce how much money you could make. It could raise your cost. It could potentially make you lose focus. But that's only if your focus is only on profit making. if you change your focus to believing that you're a global citizen, your organization should do better, these things, these terminal values, aren't the only thing that you care about. Ultimately, you hopefully should care about instrumental values and terminal values. But this is where it makes things difficult, right? Because your stakeholders are not just your shareholders and profit-making ideology, right? So I'll give you this little comic to look at. Why do we have to pretend to care when I don't? There, old chap. Of course you don't care. Now come along, pull yourself together, right? And I think the reality is lots of companies and lots of corporate executives don't care that much. Or they might care, but ultimately this near-term future of making more money makes them care less or not care enough. And that's something that we want to change ultimately. And so Keith Davis said this, and he's a management theorist. Societies want business, as well as all other major institutions, to assume significant social responsibility. Social responsibility has become the hallmark of a mature global organization. The business which vacillates or chooses not to enter the arena of social responsibility may find that it gradually will sink into customer and public disfavor. And I feel like you can see this now, right? This wasn't even a conversation when I was growing up. At least I didn't really hear about the conversation so much growing up. But you can see now that companies are under the microscope. And whether you believe or whether you agree or not, this is where the society is moving. And I would say I agree. We need to have organizations and companies fighting for this, right? The world can't be fighting these powerful organizations tooth and nail to want them to be socially responsible. We want these businesses to be the leaders at the forefront of changing the world to make it better, because they have the power to do so, right? And ultimately, we all understand the whole thing about consumers voting with their dollars. And so hopefully we keep companies in power that will try to do this, right? And again, this is a long, long road, and we know the companies will skirt these issues, but we want to keep them accountable and want to make them try. So that's the end of today's lesson. So today I want you to go and read Core Values, 3 Ways to Cut the BS. And I want you to read the Foremost Department Stores case. And so I want you all to read the case individually. And I'm going to put you into groups where you're going to answer the questions together. And so you'll post those responses on Edsby, and we will have a conversation about that tomorrow or later. All right, thank you.